Is there a crystal ball hidden somewhere in the Simpsons writer's room? It's the question that floods comment sections every time another one of their gags accidentally becomes real. For over 30 years, this animated family has been more than just TV. They've been weirdly accurate fortune tellers. Of all their predictions, though, from political bombshells to scientific breakthroughs, one of the most famous is the Smartwatch. In a 1995 episode, The Simpsons showed us the future, right on a character's wrist. You're seeing a man talking directly into his watch, nearly 2 decades before the Apple Watch made that a normal thing to do. So, were the writers just genuine prophets, or were they incredibly sharp guessers who saw where the world was heading? The real story is more fascinating than you might think. To really get the weight of this, let's fire up the time machine and head back to 1995. Forget 5G, most of us were still listening to the screeching orchestra of a dial-up modem. Social networks weren't a thing, and cell phones were chunky bricks used for one thing: making calls. Into this world, the episode Lisa's Wedding landed like a message from another timeline.
Looking at you makes me want to get married for a 3rd time.
In this version of the then distant year 2010, Lisa falls for a charming Englishman named Hugh Parkfield. And it's Hugh who casually shows off a piece of tech that will become the stuff of legend. After a botched proposal, a flustered Hugh lifts his wrist and speaks into his watch.
Oh, blast. Go to plan B.
It's a phone. A watch that's also a phone. For audiences in 1995, whose idea of a high-tech watch was a Casio with a calculator, this was pure sci-fi. It was a throwaway joke that had lasted only a few seconds, but it planted a seed. It was a glimpse of a world where communication wasn't just mobile, but wearable, and as time proved, it was an astonishingly accurate glimpse. When you look closely at Hugh Parkfield's watch, the first thing you notice is its design. It's a funny mix of past and future. The watch has a very clear flip phone vibe. Hugh has to physically open a panel to talk into it, which reveals a little keypad. Now, in hindsight, this is one of the most charming parts of the prediction. Obviously, it's not what modern smartwatches look like. Today's gadgets, like the Apple Watch or Samsung Galaxy Watch, are all sleek, single-surface touchscreens. There are no flipping parts. In that way, they got the form factor wrong. But you have to remember the context of 1995. The flip phone was the coolest, most futuristic design around. The writers were just doing what good futurists do. They took the most advanced tech they knew, miniaturized it, and strapped it to a wrist. So while the flip-up part seems a little dated now, it was the perfect visual cue for a 90s audience. This is incredible because it predates the mainstream use of voice calls on smartwatches by almost 20 years. When the first smartwatches came out in the early 2010s, they were mostly for notifications and fitness tracking. The ability to actually make a call from your wrist was a huge selling point later on, marketed as a feature of freedom and convenience. The Simpsons didn't bog down their gag with 100 different apps. They focused on the one killer feature that would make a watch smart, turning it into a phone. Maybe the most mind-blowing part of this whole thing is the timeline. The episode aired in 1995 and was set 15 years in the future, 2010. Think about that. The writers had to pick a date that sounded futuristic but not too far-fetched. They landed on 2010. So, how close were they? Shockingly close. The modern smartwatch era really kicked off around 2013 with devices like the Pebble, and then exploded in 2015 with the first Apple Watch. For a forecast made 15 years out, being off by only a few years is an unbelievably small margin of error. The episode also shows Lisa making a video call to Marge.
Hello! How are you doing in England?
You and I are getting married!
While video calling existed in some forms for years, it became widely accessible on mobile with the launch of FaceTime on the iPhone 4 in 2010. It's this convergence that elevates the prediction from a lucky guess to something that feels almost prophetic.
Now we'll see what the future holds.
This brings us to the big question. How did they pull it off? The reality is a mix of cultural awareness, smart extrapolation, and creative genius. First, the idea of a wrist communicator wasn't new. It had been a sci-fi staple for decades, seen everywhere from the Jetsons to, most famously, the detective Dick Tracy, who had a two-way radio on his wrist way back in the 1940s. The show's writers grew up with this stuff, so the idea was already floating around in pop culture. Second, real-world tech was already pointing in that direction. By 1995, companies like Seiko and Timex had released smartwatches that could store data. The Simpsons writers were just connecting the dots. They saw technology getting smaller, communication getting more mobile, and the old sci-fi dream of a wrist phone, and they put it all together. As writer Stephanie Gillis once said, they are sort of futurologists who have to make educated guesses about where society is headed because they write episodes so far in advance. Looking back at Lisa's wedding, the smartwatch prediction is a hallmark of the show's cultural legacy. Was it the first time anyone ever imagined a watch phone? No. Was the design a perfect match for what we have today? Not quite. But what makes this prediction so legendary is its context and its uncanny accuracy. This one gag became a touchstone for our fascination with the show's foresight. It doesn't really matter if it was a prediction, a guess, or an inspiration for future innovators. It was just great storytelling that gave us a peek at the world we were all about to live in.